Right, so let's run through a scenario where I'll just type it up here. So I'm going to put in my name, and then what I want to do is when I click on submit, what it's doing is it's created a instance of my person, and it's using the object was then sent to, my person object was sent to the list box. The list box then is printing out the toString method from my person object. And then what we're going to do is if we double click on the selected name, whatever the selected name is in this particular, in our list box here, if I double click on it, that object's name is being sent to this text box where I can then revise it. When I click submit, then that name is passed back to my original form. That person object is being updated, and that object's toString method then is being displayed here in the list box. So let's see how that plays out. All right, I'm going to hit close this out and start rolling with it. So I've already taken a started a form, and I have a text box that I've named. Let's get rid of this. A text box that I've named text name. I have a list box that I've named list name, and then of course, well, I called it create person in this example. So create person will then create that person object. So let's get started by creating our person object. All right, so on my project, I'm going to add a class at the bottom here, and we're going to add a person class. All right, so let's see, we need to create a property. So prop tab gives me a string, and I'm just going to put name. Let's create a constructor. I'm going to call it, constructor is public person, and we'll take the name, and we can set then the name equal to name. Okay, and then the last piece then would be adding the toString method. So public string override, oops, I did that backwards, override toString, perfect. And then we'll return something simple, like I think in my example I had person plus name. All right, so that I'm going to shift control B. I always like to build it, save it, just to make sure that everything is compiling correctly. So far, so good. All right, so the first part of that was when we put in a name in the text box, we'll hit create person. That will create a person object that we will then use to fill our list box. So let's make that happen. So if I double click on this, there we go. All right, so button create. So we need to, let's see, we'll get that name, string name is equal to, we'll get that value out of the text box, textbox.text. Okay, and then we're going to create our person object, person equals new person, and we had to send it a name, so we have a name now. So now I've created a new person object, and then we will assign that to, we'll add it to the items that are in our items, there we go, that add, and we're going to add our person object. All right, so far so good. So the next part then is the double click. So let me do shift control B, make sure I did everything correctly. Good. Okay, so the next item was that we're going to double click on the name, a name that's in that list box, and have it bring up the new form. So first of all, we need to create the new form. So I'm going to right click on my project and then add new Windows form, and we'll call this form add or something like that. Okay, should be capital F. Let's do add name or something. All right, it's probably not add, we're editing it, but it doesn't matter. Edit name. All right, so that's the name of our new form. And on this form then we're going to have a text box, so I need to pull up my toolbox. Okay, and we're going to have a text box, and in that text box is going to receive our name, so we'll call it text name. And then we're going to have a button. And so the idea was, we'll call this button save, and then our text is save. And the idea there was that if we make a change to that value, whatever was submitted into the text box, then that's going to change and send that change back to our original form. All right, remember that this is kind of acting like a dialog box, so we want to click on our save button. We want to have it send back data, and so we were going to go to the dialog box result, and we're going to click on OK. So if you want to do a cancel, that would be appropriate, but for this example, we've done that in other videos, so I'm just going to put OK for now. All right, so remember then that I'm going to go into the code here. Remember that from our other video, in order to transfer that text back and forth, we need a public property. I'm going to call this string. I'm going to call this name. And so we would be able to send that name back and forth. So let's see. Building it to make sure I don't have any errors yet. Looking good. All right, so now I have my public property, so I can send the name back and forth between. Remember that a form is an object, and as such I have to treat it accordingly, and everything that's in the form is private, which is why I needed to make this public property so that I can get this value from the text box. Remember, this acts as a middleman to get the value from the text box back and forth between my first form and the second form. So next thing we're going to do then is we're going to work on that double click from, let me pull these into two different, there's my form one and two edits. Okay, so from here, let's see where I need to go. Get my thoughts together, pull this one over here so I can see these side by side. Very good. Okay, and we don't need you anymore. All right, so the next thought is I'm going to be double clicking on an item here in my list box, and in doing so it's going to generate, it's going to open up this box, put whatever name I selected and put it into this text box. Well, okay, how are we going to do that? So if I just double click on this list box, I'm getting selected index changed, and that's a single click. So that's not really what I want to do. I want to assign a different event to this item. So again, I'm going to just click on list box once, click on the lightning bolt, which will give me all the possible events available. And I want to slide up to double click. So I'm going to do something on a double click rather than the defaulted selected index change. So I'm going to double click in this box here, which creates for me a double click event, which is really what I wanted to do. All right, so once the user double clicks on a name, the first thing we're going to do let's just type this up, when user double clicks on a selected item, then what are we going to do? We are going to take the selected object. Remember, it's an object, person object, because we're filling our list box with objects. Let me close this up a little bit so we have a little bit more room. And we're going to take it out of the list box. Take the selected person out of the list box. Okay, so how do we do that? We're going to put it into a selected person, which is an object. So we're taking an object out of the list box and putting it into our object, our person object variable. And so if we get list name dot selected item, let's see what that returns. We're getting a squirrely line there, squiggly line. So the reason is you can see that this is returning just an object. So it's a generic object, and we need a person object. So if we cast this to person, P-E-R-S-O-N, we should be good. There we go. All right, so now we've gotten rid of squiggly lines. We've pulled out an object out of our list box. We've put it into our object variable of type person. So we've created another person object from our selected list item. All right, so now that we have our person selected, so we have an object of the person selected from the list box, we need to create an instance of the new form. So I'm going to put second form. Okay, so I think I called it, what did we call that name? Edit name equals new. Remember that a form is just another class. Syntax is a problem. There we go. All right, and then we need to send the name to the new form, to, let's do edit forms, text box. Okay, but we can't send it to the text box because, sorry about that, we can't send it to the text box because the text box is private, so we have to send it to the edit forms public name property. Okay, and so to do that, we're just going to do, there's the name of the form, edit name dot name is equal to this selected person dot name. Okay, and then that will send the just the name value to our other form. Okay, fantastic. All right, so then we need to show the form. Sorry, I had a phone call going at the same time. I had my cat trying to eat the breakfast, so I got a little bit sidetracked here. So let's get back on track. All right, so now we need to show that form. So remember we did this with a dialog box. We did a dialog result. So the result is receiving data from our form. Let's just finish this up. So I need, what is the name of our form? Edit form equals edit form, edit name dot show dialog. All right, so show dialog, remember, says go show that form as we're simulating a dialog box that we created an OK button on. So when the user clicks on OK, we will know what button they clicked on, and so that's our way of getting data back from that box. And so then when the box is, let me just type this out so get my thoughts straight. So the compiler will return to this line here when the form is closed or disposed of, or we'll say closed. Okay, so from there what we need to do is we need to go into our other form, our edit form, and now that we've sent the data to the form, we've sent it this name. Remember on load, we need to set that text box, text name dot text equal to name. All right, good. So then we need to assign in this form, let me shift Control B just to make sure I've done everything correctly so far. Okay, good. And so now we need to make sure that when we click on this button, that it sends the data back. So we've done this in a prior video, so I'm going kind of quickly through this, but we've done it in another video. So remember, double click on save. We're going to do the opposite of what we've just done. So the public property name is equal to the text box name.text. Okay, and so once that name is sent back to our, I'm going to close, listen, I'm going to make it smaller. All right, so then the form gets closed, and we now have, we can check for the result, if result. In this case, we just set up a, for this example, we just set up one button. So if it's okay, then what do we need to do? We need to update our object, our person object. So selected person dot name is equal to, remember that in order to get to that value, we access it through the form's public property. So we called our form edit name dot name. There we go. And then the only part we need to do now is make sure that we update our list box with the new value that we got from with our updated person. So in order to do that, what we'll do is we'll take that list box, which was list name. We will remove the one that was there. List move items, remove, because we don't want, we've updated, potentially we've updated the name in there. So we need to remove this object that's currently in there, which was a selected person. And we're going to update it with our updated version of add selected person. All right, so let's see if that all runs. So I'm going to Shift Control B just to make sure I don't have any compilers ahead of time. So it looks good. Let's go ahead and run that and make sure that it's working. And so first I type in a name and I hit create person. So the object then is added to our list box. If I double click on person and I change it to Kirsten's form or something silly and I choose save, we can see that that has been changed. And just for demonstration, I want to double show you this. So we see that that's all working. Let's go back to the point where we created the name. Okay, so remember when we created, in the original form, we put in a name and then I put in the object. So I put in person object and it prints out the toString method. If I just put in name here, just for comparison, so I'm just putting in a string. So if I just put in the string that the user typed in from the text and we run that, we're going to see something a little different. We're going to see if I just put in here, remember that it's creating a person object, but it's just printing out that name. And so by sending the list box, the object, right, it goes right here, the object instead, we are able to utilize methods, or in our case, we're utilizing the toString method, which then printed out the toString that we created for the toString method for our object. So hopefully that helps kind of put some of these pieces together so that it'll be helpful for you in the upcoming final project.